Hi everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. I've always been the one to put people to sleep, to guide them into a state of oblivion where their worries and pains are momentarily forgotten. My name is Isabella, and as an anesthesiologist I've mastered the art of controlling consciousness. But lately I've been wondering, what if I could control more than just the sleep of others? What if I could wake up for my own life? My days were filled with a sterile scent of hospital corridors, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, and the soft controlled breathing of patient under my care. My life with William, my husband of over a decade, was equally predictable. We lived in a quaint suburban home where every morning started with the same routine: coffee, a kiss and a wave goodbye as he headed to his job as a software engineer. Our Labrador Retriever Buck was always there, his tail a metronome of joy, his presence a constant reminder of the life we had built together. Yet as I watched William leave each day, a part of me felt like I was watching myself leave too, but in a different way. I was becoming a spectator in my own life, anesthetized by the very routine I had once cherished. It was as if I was living in a dream, or rather a C*****T-rated play where I knew all the lines, all the cues, but had forgotten the meaning behind them. This feeling of disconnection grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just the monotony of my job or the predictability of our home life. It was something deeper, a restlessness that seemed to whisper from the shadows of my mind, urging me to question everything I had accepted as normal. One evening, as I sat in our living room, the television murmuring in the background, I found myself staring at the framed photos on our walls. Each picture captured a moment of happiness, of love, of life. But as I looked closer, I noticed something unsettling in every photo. My smile seemed forced, my eyes slightly out of focus, as if I was looking at something just beyond the camera's reach that night. Sleep was elusive. I lay next to William, listening to his steady breathing, feeling the warmth of Buck curled at our feet. But my mind was racing. What was I missing? What was this itch beneath my skin? This growing sense that something was not just wrong, but fundamentally off the next morning, instead of the usual routine. I found myself driving aimlessly. After dropping William off at work, I ended up at a small, secluded park, one we used to visit in our early days. Together the place was deserted, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. Sitting on a bench, I watched the world move in slow motion, each leaf falling with a purpose I couldn't grasp. It was here, in this quiet solitude, that the first crack appeared in the foundation of my life. A memory long buried surfaced like a bubble from the depths of my subconscious. It was from a time before William, before my career, before the life I had built, a time when I was someone else, or perhaps more myself than I had ever been. I remembered a conversation with an old friend, someone who had always seen through my facades. She had once told me, "Isabella, you're like a sleepwalked going through the motions, but never truly awake." At the time I had laughed it off, but now those words echoed with a chilling clarity. As I sat there, the sun casting long shadows across the grass, I realized that the restlessness wasn't just a feeling. It was a call to wake up, to see beyond the veil of routine, to understand what had been stirring within me. This wasn't just about my career or my marriage. It was about my very existence. What if the life I had been living was not the one I was meant to live? What if the perfect life was just a facade, a dream I had been anesthetized into? Believing the realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I stood up, the world around me, suddenly vivid. The colors brighter, the sounds sharper. I knew then that I was at a crossroads, one where I could either continue to sleepwalk through my life or choose to wake up and face whatever lay beyond the comfort of my routine. The decision was mine, but the path was unclear. What could possibly shake the foundations of my seemingly perfect life? Perhaps it was time to find out. The day started like any other. I kissed William goodbye as he left for work. His usual cheerful "have a great day" love echoing in my ears. Buck and I had our morning routine, a walk around the neighborhood, followed by me preparing for my shift at the hospital. However, today, an unexpected call from the hospital changed my plans. A colleague had fallen ill and I was needed for an emergency shift. With William at work and no one to look after Buck, I decided to take him with me. The hospital was close to a train station, and I thought a quiet place like that would be perfect for Buck to rest while I worked. I left him there, tied to a bench with a bowl of water and his favorite toy. What could possibly go wrong in such a serene setting? As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been growing within me. The memory from the park, the words of my old friend, they all seemed to converge into this moment. Was this another sign, a test of my resolve to wake up from the dream I had been living? The hospital was unusually quiet when I arrived. The corridors, usually bustling with activity, felt almost abandoned. I made my way to the locker room, changing into my scrubs, my mind still wrestling with the thoughts that had been plaguing me. The emergency shift was intense. A car accident had brought in several patients, all requiring immediate attention. I moved from one operating room to another, administering anesthesia, monitoring vitals, and ensuring that each patient was safely under before the surgeons could begin their work. It was during these moments, when I was in control of others' consciousness, that I felt most alive. But even in the midst of chaos, my mind wandered back to Buck. Tied up at the train station, I glanced at the clock, noting the time. It had been hours. I should check on him, I thought. But another emergency call came through, pulling me back into the fray. Finally, as the last patient was stabilized, I found a moment to breathe. I slipped out of the hospital, my heart racing, not just from the adrenaline of the shift, but from the growing anxiety about Buck. The train station was only a short walk away, but every step felt like a mile. The station was quieter than usual, the usual hustle and bustle replaced by an eerie calm. I spotted Buck immediately, still tied to the bench, but something was off. His tail wasn't wagging and his head was down, not alert as it should be. Buck! I called out, my voice trembling slightly. As I approached, he didn't lift his head. Panic surged through me as I ran the last few steps. His water bowl was empty, his toy discarded to the side. I knelt beside him, my hands shaking as I checked for any signs of distress. His breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed. Buck, what's wrong? I whispered, fear gripping my heart. I untied him, quickly lifting him into my arms. He was heavier than usual, his body limp. I glanced around hoping for anyone who might have seen what happened. But the station was deserted, the silence now oppressive. I carried him back to the hospital, my mind racing with possibilities. Had he been poisoned? Was he just overheated? The question swirled as I rushed through the corridors. My colleagues, concerned, looks following me. Once in the vet's office, the diagnosis was swift hetero. The vet worked quickly, cooling Buck down, administering fluids. I sat beside him, my hand on his fur, whispering apologies, promises to never leave him like that again. The wait was agonizing. Each second stretched into eternity as I watched Buck, his life hanging in the balance. It was then in that sterile room that the reality of my life hit me with a force I couldn't ignore. I had been so focused on my own existential crisis, on waking up for my life, that I had neglected the very beings that made it worth living. William, Buck. They were my anchors, yet I had been drifting away, lost in my own thoughts, my own desires for change. As Buck's condition stabilized, relief washed over me, but it was tinged with a sobering realization. My life wasn't just about me. It was about us, my choices, my actions. They rippled out, affecting those I loved. The vet's words echoed in my mind. His lucky you got him here in time. Lucky, was I lucky, or was this a wake-up call? A stark reminder of what was truly important. With Buck resting, I stepped outside the room, the hospital's fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. I leaned against the wall, the weight of my decisions heavy on my shoulders. What if waking up meant not just finding myself, but also ensuring the well-being of those I loved? The question lingered, unresolved, as I returned to Buck, my heart heavy with both gratitude and guilt. Today had not just been about an emergency shift or a sick colleague. It was about life, about choices, and about the delicate balance between self-discovery and responsibility. And as I sat there watching Buck's C***** T rise and fall, I knew that whatever path I chose next, it would not be walked alone. The train station was eerily silent, the last train having departed hours ago. The dim lights cast long shadows across the empty platforms, and the air was thick with a scent of metal and old wood. I approached Buck, expecting his usual enthusiastic greeting, but instead I found him alone, His leash taut as he pulled against it, his eyes wide, with a mix of fear and excitement. I called out to him, my voice echoing in the vast emptiness, "Buck, what's wrong, boy?" His tail didn't wag. Instead he whimpered, his body tense. The sight of him so unlike his usual self sent to chill down my spine in that moment. The weight of my day, the exhaustion from the emergency shift and the guilt of leaving him here alone overwhelmed me. It was as if the solitude of a station had stripped away my usual barriers, leaving me vulnerable to emotions I usually kept at bay. I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as I untied the leash. Buck's fur was warm, too warm, and his breathing was ragged. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, a stark reminder of the neglect I had shown him. As I sat there stroking his fur, trying to calm him, something shifted within me. The isolation, the dim lights and the silence of the station created a bubble where my usual inhibitions seemed to dissolve. A cocktail of exhaustion and an inexplicable surge of desire washed over me, blurring the lines of what was acceptable. I found myself crossing a line I never thought I would, driven by a moment of weakness. What happened next was a blur of confusion and guilt. I had betrayed William in the most unimaginable way with our own cute dog, Buck. The realization hit me like a wave of nausea. I stood up, my legs shaky, my mind reeling with the implications of my actions. The silence of the station now felt oppressive, a witness to my fall from grace. I needed to get out of there to escape the weight of what I had done. I picked up Buck, his body limp in my arms, and hurried back to the hospital. The walk felt like a march to my own execution, each step echoing with the gravity of my betrayal. Back at the hospital, I found a quiet corner away from prying eyes. Buck was still not himself, and my heart ached with the knowledge that I had contributed to his distress. I sat with him, my mind racing, trying to process the enormity of my actions. The guilt was suffocating. How could I face William after this? How could I look at Buck knowing what I had done? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more damning than the last. I knew I had to confront this to deal with the weight of my actions, but first I needed to ensure Buck was okay. I called for a vet, explaining his condition, my voice barely above a whisper, laden with the guilt I felt. As the vet took Buck away for treatment, I was left alone with my thoughts. The hospital corridors, usually a place of healing, now felt like a labyrinth of my own making, each turn leading deeper into the maze of my conscience. I wandered aimlessly, my mind replaying the scene at the station, each detail more vivid, more painful than the last. I had always been in control, guiding others into oblivion. But now I was the one lost, searching for a way back to the person I thought I was. The realization that I needed help was stark. I couldn't navigate this alone. I found a quiet room away from the bustle and sat down. My hands were still shaking as I pulled out my phone, contemplating who to call. Not William. Not yet. I needed clarity, first, a way to understand what had driven me to such a point. I dialed the number of an old friend, someone who had always seen through my facades. The phone rang, each tone a beat of my anxious heart. When she answered, her voice was a lifeline in the storm of my emotions. "Isabella, what's wrong?" she asked, her tone immediately concerned. I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. I've done something terrible," I managed to say, my voice breaking. There was a pause. Then her voice, steady and calm. "Tell me." And so I did. I poured out everything, the feeling of being trapped, the incident with Buck, my betrayal of William. It was like lancing a wound, painful but necessary. She listened without judgment, her silence a balm to my frayed nerves. When I finished, she spoke softly. "Isabella, you've been carrying so much. It's time to let some of it go. You need to talk to William, but first you need to forgive yourself. You're not alone in this." Her words were a small comfort, but the path forward was still obscured by my guilt and confusion. I knew I had to face William, to confess, to seek forgiveness, but the thought was paralyzing. As I sat there, the hospital's fluorescent lights flickering above, I made a silent bow. I would not let this moment define me. I would seek help, confront my actions, and try to mend what I had broken. The journey to redemption would be long, fraught with pain and self-doubt. But it was a journey I had to take for William, for Buck, and most importantly for myself. The station silence had revealed my darkest moment. But it was here, in the stark light of the hospital, that I would begin to find my way back. The days that followed were a haze. I couldn't look at William without feeling a surge of shame. Every interaction with Buck was tainted by the memory of that night. I started avoiding both, working longer hours, coming home late, hoping to escape my own mind. One evening William confronted me. "Isabella, you've been distant. Is there something you want to tell me?" His eyes searched mine for the truth I was too afraid to reveal. I felt my heart pounding in my C*******T, the weight of my secret pressing down on me. "I've been struggling." I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper, with what William's concern was palpable, his hand reaching out to touch mine. I pulled away slightly, the touch feeling like an accusation. "It's about me, about us," I said, my words faltering. "I've been feeling lost, like I'm not really here, not really living." William's expression softened, but his eyes still held a question. "Is there someone else?" The question hit like a physical blow. No. It's not that," I rushed to clarify the lie, tasting bitter on my tongue. "It's just I've been feeling disconnected from you, from everything." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I've noticed. I thought, maybe you were just stressed with work." "It's more than that." I admit it, the confession beginning to spill out. "I've been questioning everything, our life, my choices." That night at the station when Buck got sick, it was like a wake-up call, but not the kind I expected. William looked up, confusion, knitting his brows. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, the truth clawing its way at my throat. "I did something I'm not proud of, something that's been eating at me. I betrayed your trust, and I'm so sorry." His face paled and he sat back, his hands clasping together as if to brace himself. "What did you do, Isabella?" The room seemed to shrink around us, the air thick with the anticipation of my confession. I was overwhelmed, not thinking clearly. I crossed a line with Buck. It was a moment of weakness, of confusion, and I've been carrying the guilt ever since. Silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. William's face was a mask of shock, his eyes searching mine for some sign that this was a cruel jest. But there was none. "You with Buck?" His voice was a whisper, disbelief and hurt mingling in his tone. I nodded, tears welling up, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, William. I don't know what came over me. I've been so lost trying to find myself, and I made a terrible mistake." He stood abruptly, pacing the room, his hands running through his hair. I need some time to think about this, Isabella. This is a lot." I watched him, my heart aching with the realization of how deeply I had wounded him. "I understand, I'll give you space, but I want you to know I'm going to seek help. I need to understand why I did what I did, and I want to make things right if that's even possible." William stopped, pacing his back to me. "I don't know what to say right now. I need to process this." The room felt colder, the distance between us growing with each passing second. I stood, feeling the weight of my actions more than ever. "I'll be at my friend's place tonight. Take all the time you need." As I left the house, the door closing behind me felt like a chapter closing in our lives. The night air was cool, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I walked to my car, each step heavy with the burden of my confession driving away. I felt the first real pang of what waking up from my life might truly entail. It wasn't just about finding myself. It was about facing the consequences of my actions, about the potential loss of what I had once taken for granted. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with the possibility of losing William, of losing the life we had built together. But as I drove, I knew this was the path I had to take, not just for redemption, but for understanding, for healing, and perhaps for a chance to rebuild what I had so carelessly broken. The journey was mine, but the impact was ours, and as the city lights blurred past, I realized that waking up meant not just finding myself, but also ensuring the well-being of those I loved, even if it meant letting them go. I couldn't bear the weight of my secret any longer. With tears streaming down my face, I confessed everything to William. His face went from confusion to horror, then to a cold, unreadable mask. He didn't shout. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply said, "I need some time to think," and walked out, leaving me with Buck, who looked at me with those same now hauntingly familiar eyes. The silence in the house was deafening. I sat on the couch, my mind replaying the moment of my confession, each word echoing like a hammer strike against the foundation of our marriage. "Buck," sensing the tension, laid his head on my lap, his eyes full of an innocence that now felt like a cruel reminder of my actions. Days turned into weeks, and William's absence grew more pronounced. The house once filled with laughter and the comforting sounds of our life together, now echoed with emptiness. Each morning I went through the motions of my routine, but the joy was gone, the coffee tasted bitter, the kiss was a memory, and the wave goodbye was to an empty space where William used to stand. I sought solace in work, throwing myself into the sterile environment of the hospital where I could control the consciousness of others but not my own. Every patient I anesthetized was a brief escape from my reality, a moment where I could forget the turmoil at home. But the relief was fleeting and the return to my personal life was a harsh awakening. One evening after another long shift, I returned to find a note from William on the kitchen table. "We need to talk," it read, his handwriting as familiar as his touch once was. My heart sank, knowing this conversation could define the rest of our lives. The next day I arrived home to find William waiting, his expression somber. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we had shared countless meals and dreams. "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me," William began, his voice steady but distant. "I've tried to understand Isabella. I've tried to see it from your perspective, but I'm struggling. What you did, it's not just about the act itself. It's about trust, about the foundation of our relationship." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I know, William. I've been seeing a therapist trying to understand why I felt so lost, why I did what I did. It's not an excuse, but I'm working on it. I want to make things right, if that's even possible." He looked at me, his eyes searching for something I wasn't sure I could give. "I believe you're trying, Isabella. But trust is fragile. I need to know if you're the same person I married or if you've changed in ways I can't comprehend." The conversation stretched into the night, raw and painful. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and the life we had built together. William expressed his hurt, his confusion, and his love, which was now tangled with doubt. "I love you, Isabella," he said, his voice breaking. "But I need time to see if I can trust you again, if we can rebuild what's been broken." I agreed, knowing that rushing him would only push him further away. We decided to take a break, not from each other, but from the expectations of what our marriage should be. He would stay at his brother's for a while, giving us both space to reflect. As William packed a bag, I watched, feeling the house grow colder. With each item he removed, Buck, sensing the shift, whimpered softly, his tail no longer wagging with its usual enthusiasm. With William gone, the house felt like a mausoleum of our past life. I spent nights alone, the silence amplifying my thoughts. I dove deeper into therapy, confronting the parts of myself I had ignored, the parts that had led me to that moment of weakness. My therapist, Dr. Luna, became a beacon in my storm. "Isabella, you've been living in a dream, anesthetized by routine. Now you're waking up and it's painful. But waking up is the first step to living again, truly living," she often said. I began to volunteer at an animal shelter, seeking redemption through helping creatures like Buck. Each cute dog I cared for reminded me of him, of the Inuk I had betrayed. It was there, amidst the barks and wagging tails, that I started to find pieces of myself again. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of the shelter, my phone buzzed with a message from William. "Can we meet? I've been thinking." We met at the park where my journey of self-realization had begun. The place was as serene as ever, but now it held a different significance. William looked different, more introspective, his usual cheerfulness replaced by a thoughtful gravity. "I've missed you," he admitted, his eyes meeting mine, "and I've missed us. But I need to know, Isabella, are you ready to start anew? Not just for me but for you." I took his hands, feeling the warmth I had longed for. "I'm not the same person, William. I've woken up from a dream and I'm learning to live again. I want to rebuild with you if you'll have me." He pulled me into a hug, the first real connection we had in weeks. "Let's try, Isabella. Let's try to find our way back to each other." Our path forward was uncertain, fraught with the need for forgiveness, understanding and patience. But as we walked through the park hand in hand with Buck trotting beside us, I felt a glimmer of hope. The journey to redemption was long filled with moments of doubt and pain, but it was also filled with the potential for healing. I had woken up from my life not just to face my mistakes, but to build something new, something real with the man I loved and the cute dog who had unknowingly shown me the way as we left the park. The setting sun cast long shadows, but it also painted the sky in hues of promise. The road ahead was ours to walk together if we chose to. And in that moment I chose to walk it. Not alone but with William, with Buck and with a newfound understanding of myself. In the weeks that followed, William moved out. The house felt empty, the silence deafening. I was left with Buck, whose presence was now a constant reminder of my fall from grace. Therapy became my refuge, a place to untangle the mess of emotions and understand my actions. I learned to live with my guilt, to forgive myself. Though the process was slow and painful, William and I decided on a separation, not a divorce, leaving a door ajar for potential reconciliation. Life moved forward but not without scars. Will Isabella ever find peace, or will her past continue to haunt her? The days stretched into weeks, each one a slow, deliberate step through a fog of remorse and introspection. The house, once a sanctuary of our shared life, now echoed with the absence of William. Every corner, every room whispered of what once was and what might never be again. I threw myself into therapy sessions, with Dr. Luna becoming the cornerstone of my week. She helped me navigate the labyrinth of my mind, where guilt and shame had taken root like invasive weeds. Isabella, she would say, her voice's steady anchor. Understanding your actions is the first step towards healing. But remember, healing is not just about the mind, it's about the heart, too. In those sessions, I dissected my life, my choices, and the moment of weakness at the train station. It was a dark chapter, one that I could neither erase nor ignore. I spoke of the disconnection. I felt the routine that had anesthetized me to the point of losing myself. Dr. Luna listened, her insights like a mirror reflecting parts of me I had long avoided outside of therapy. I found solace in the animal shelter. The cute dogs there, with their unconditional love, became my silent confessors. Each wagging tail, each grateful look from a rescued animal, was a small step towards redemption. I cared for them, cleaned their kennels, and sometimes just sat with them, sharing in their quiet companionship. It was here, amidst the barks and the occasional howl, that I began to piece together a new version of myself. One evening, as I was locking up the shelter, my phone vibrated with a message from William. "Can we talk?" It read. My heart skipped a beat, a mixture of hope and dread swirling within me. We agreed to meet at a cafe, neutral ground where the past and future could perhaps find a middle ground. Sitting across from him, the familiar yet distant look in his eyes, I felt the weight of our shared history. "I've been thinking," William started, his voice careful, "about us, about what happened. I've missed you, Isabella. But I need to know if you've changed, if you're ready to rebuild." His words were like a bomb and a blade. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of coffee, and the unspoken "I've been working on myself. William, I've woken up from a dream and I'm learning to live again. Truly. Live. I want to rebuild with you. If you'll have me." He nodded, his gaze dropping to his coffee cup. "I believe you're trying, Isabella, but trust. It's not something that can be rebuilt overnight." We talked for hours, the cafe emptying around us. We spoke of forgiveness, of understanding of the life we had built and the one we might build anew. It was a conversation filled with raw honesty, the kind that strips away all pretense. As we parted ways, there was no embrace, no promises, just a mutual understanding that we were both at the beginning of a long journey. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, it felt like there was a road ahead. Back at home, the silence was less oppressive. I sat with Buck, his head resting on my lap, his eyes now a symbol of forgiveness rather than guilt. I stroked his fur, whispering promises of a better future, not just for us, but for the family we once were. Therapy continued each session, peeling back another layer of my psyche. Dr. Luna helped me confront not just my actions, but the underlying reasons for them. "You've been searching for something, Isabella," she said one day, "something beyond the routine, beyond the comfort of your life. That search led you astray, but it also brought you here to this moment of awakening." Volunteering at the shelter became more than just a way to atone. It was a way to connect, to feel part of something larger than myself. Each cute dog I helped, each life I touched was a step towards understanding the depth of my own humanity. Months passed and slowly William and I began to meet more frequently. Our conversations were cautious at first, filled with the tentative steps of three people relearning each other. We talked about everything from trivial daily events to the profound changes within us. One chilly autumn evening, as leaves crunched underfoot, we walked through the park where my journey of self-realization had begun. The air was crisp, carrying the promise of change. "I've missed this," William said, his hand brushing mine. "I've missed us." I looked at him, seeing not just the man I had hurt but the man I still loved. "I've missed us too," I replied. My voice stuttered despite the storm of emotions inside. "And I'm ready, William, ready to work on us, on me, on everything." He took my hand, and for the first time in a long while it felt like a beginning rather than an end. We walked our steps, synchronized, Buck trotting beside us, his tail wagging with a joy that seemed to echo the hope in our hearts. The journey to peace was not linear. There were days when the past loomed large, when the weight of my actions felt too heavy to bear. But with each step, with each shared moment with William, with each act of kindness at the shelter, I felt the shadows of my past receding. Peace, I realized, was not a destination but a journey. It was in the quiet moments of self-forgiveness, in the slow rebuilding of trust, in the laughter that once again filled our home. It was in the understanding that while the past could not be undone, the future was ours to shape. As we left the park, the setting sun cast long shadows, but it also painted the sky in hues of promise. The road ahead was ours to walk together if we chose to. And in that moment I chose to walk it not alone, but with William, with Buck, and with a newfound understanding of myself. The question of whether I would ever find peace was no longer a looming uncertainty, but a daily commitment to growth, to love, and to the healing of wounds, both seen and unseen. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks.